Hey, what's up? Andrew Kramer here for VideoCopilot.net, and welcome to another very exciting tutorial. Today, we're going to be taking a look at recreating this airplane interior starring Sam Loya and Tino Hertz. It's going to be a lot of fun, and this tutorial has some great information, so hopefully it really takes off. All right, let's just move on. Let's take a look.
This is your co-pilot speaking. The captain's asking you please keep your seatbelts fastened as we make our final approach. We should be touching down in about 10 minutes. Make that 5 minutes. Thank you for flying Reqiurements Airlines.
All right, so we've got a lot of things happening here, and if we kind of scrub through this video, we can see kind of a breakdown of what's happening. And we've got the green screen footage, we've got the background and the wing recreated. And for the pyrotechnics, we'll be using Action Essentials 2 along with some particle systems. So it's going to be a lot of fun, a lot of different things going on. Now, before I move on, there is something I do want to talk about. And when we posted the video, we had some aeronautics enthusiasts checking out the video, and they looked at the airplane. They said, hey, this doesn't look real because the DC-10 does not have 5 engines. So there's 2 on this wing, 2 on the other, plus the back, and that is correct. So I just wanted to point that out. They are correct. However, this is in fact based on the DC-10 airplane, and if we jump into Google, we can take a look at what that actually looks like. No, that's not it. Okay, so right here you can see it's got 1 engine on each wing plus the back engine. So would you rather be flying on an airplane with 2 engines or 7 engines? Actually, trick question, because I would rather be on one that has 8 engines. So take a look at this. We'll put one up here in the front. That's a good looking airplane. I don't care what anyone says. Let's take a look. Yeah, now we're talking. This is Reqiurements Airlines, so we can do whatever we want. We can put a couple of extra engines on there, get you there twice as fast. So really, really cool. Overnight. That's how long it took before we went bankrupt, actually. Unfortunately, lost a lot of money, billions of dollars, but it was a dream and it just didn't work out. Fuel costs alone were astronomical. In any case, let's jump back in here and put this tutorial together. So here's what we're going to be doing, if you're still watching, which I can only assume that you are not. We're going to take this footage of Sam Loya and Tino. We're going to drop it into a new comp. Perfect. And you can basically see what we did. We're on a dolly and we kind of move forward. He's got the 3D World magazine covering the 2012 catastrophe, and it's all good. This is something. All right, so first thing we're going to do is create a 3D camera using the Camera Tracker plugin from the Foundry. But before we do that, we need to mask out our characters so that they don't mess up the camera tracking data. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to take the pen tool. We're going to duplicate the footage. Bang. And we basically just need to mask them out, but I want to keep in these markers. So we'll just try to do a good job here and mask them out. So I'll hit M, set a keyframe. We'll kind of move forward here. Do the best we can. It's not going to make a big difference. All right, just try to keep that magazine out of it. And the idea here is you don't want the magazine and stuff to interact with the track points that are actually solid, because it just makes the data a little bit less accurate. So that's good. Now I need to pre-compose this layer. So I'll choose Layer, Pre-compose. This is just going to be the track mask. And we'll move all the attributes. So bang. If we solo that, it looks something like that. So now we'll take our SAM plate and we're going to apply the Camera Tracker plugin. So I'll come over here, Camera Tracker. Now this is a third-party plugin, but it is the most inexpensive 3D tracking tool you can get that works so well with After Effects. And I think we sell it on our site somewhere. So I'm not saying we don't get a piece of it, but we do get a piece of it. All right, moving on. So what we're going to do is set up a few of the options in the camera tracker. Man, this is going to be a problem. I think this is going to be a conflict of interest. I mean, not for me or the Foundry, but for JetBlue and possibly American Airlines. But we'll just don't draw any attention to it. Just don't draw any attention to it. Okay. So first thing I need to do is set up the matte source. So I'll say matte the alpha of the track mask layer. So that's perfect. We're going to set the resolution to full, and that way the tracking will be also accurate. Now this is going to take a little bit of time, so just relax. We can turn on preview features, and then we can kind of see what's going on. Now this is important. So if this were, say, set to matte inverted, we would see the track points in the wrong place. So just make sure that the tracking points show up where you want them to. So perfect. And then we'll just click track features and then take a break. All right, so we finished tracking our footage. Now, before we solve our 3D camera, I want to go ahead and input some information. So we're going to go down to the solve, and we have a focal length type. And right now it's set to unknown, and we're going to set it to a known, and we're going to set it to 35 millimeter. And that's because I happen to know the lens that we shot with. So any information that you can input into the solver, it'll just make it that much more accurate. So we punch that in, and now we can go ahead and solve the camera. All right, so we finished up, and now let's go ahead and create our scene. So we just click on the Create Scene button, and now we have some 3D data. So we have a null object that's in the middle of our 3D scene, and what I want to do actually is I want to move forward and click on this mic stand, and I'm going to right-click or control-click and choose Create Null Object. And that's going to create a null object right at that point in 3D space. So the whole trick to this 3D camera tracking thing is that it recreates the actual camera move from our live action plate. So that's really, really helpful, especially when you need to do an extensive set replacement. All right, so let's go and move on because we've got a lot of stuff to do. We've got to key out the background, replace the window, replace the airplane, add a wing, fire, smoke, atmosphere, background. Frankly, it's probably cheaper just to rent a real airplane. What I'm going to do is shut off this track mask, and here we have our SAM plate. Let's just shut off the camera tracker and choose Effect, Keying, Key Light. And we're just going to go ahead, take the screen color, click on the green here. Now the cool thing about our track markers is that they don't really intersect with our actors, so we can actually just mask them out. So we'll mask them out in a second. Let's go ahead and take a look at this key. Now I like to create like a gray solid and just stick it in the background. This way we can kind of see if the edges are neutral. We'll come down in here. Let's bring the clip white in. Maybe bring this up a touch. Now I'm concerned about this dark edge. We can shrink the edge a bit right here. We want to be careful not to crush it too bad. And then we can play around with the replacement color, but we'll try soft for now, but we may want to tweak that a little bit later. So let's just go through. I like to look at places where there's motion blur, and that's usually, where things start to fall apart. So in this case, let's set it to hard color, and that looks a little bit better, and then play with the screen balance. So that's pretty good, pretty neutral, and our edges around Sam look pretty good as well. So let's just use that for now, and we can come back to it. I see we have a little bit of a problem here. Let's turn up the gain to 105. And so that gets rid of it pretty good. And now let's go and just key out or mask out all of our track markers. Oh, and by the way, just a quick tip. Whenever you're doing a shot where you're going to create a 3D camera, you want to have tracking information. So we've got tracking information on the wall. We've got the mic stand, we have a guitar stand right here. So the more things you have in 3D space, the better and more accurate the camera solve is going to be. So if you have some other stuff like drums or, other instruments, just stick them in there and really make a big difference. So we'll turn this back on, and we'll take the pen and we'll just start masking this out. So we'll just come in here. And if you hit M on the keyboard, we can set this to subtract. Or actually, let's just set it to none right now while we look at it. And then set a keyframe for the path. So we'll move through here. Just to make sure we get the majority of this stuff. Now he pops the magazine up here a second, and yes, that's a 3D World magazine. And somebody actually called it out on the blog, and it was kind of amazing that they could recognize it. However, I would like a free subscription from 3D World magazine, the best 3D oriented magazine in the world. And you can find my address on the website. Let's see here, moving forward. How much is that plug worth? How many magazines? Can I get back issues? Can I just get the CD-ROMs with all the goodies on it? Maybe. Probably not. They're like, well, we'll let you look at the online version. Fine. Now I know there's a point where he runs across the frame. So right here his hand comes across. So let's go in here. So let's set this to subtract. And then let's add his little hand back in. So we'll just come in here. Hit M. And also hit F, and we'll feather it a touch. So we're going to kind of cheat it a bit. But we'll hit M, move back, and let's just drop this down in here. Move forward another frame, and try to collect. Just want to be careful not to introduce that track marker. Sometimes you have to remove track markers, and I'd show you how to do that. But luckily, I don't have to worry about it. So we'll save that for another tutorial. All right, so we'll set this back to subtract, and we've got rid of it. Now we've also got this other thing up here. Let's just go ahead and mask that out, and we'll hit M, subtract it, and then keyframe the path here. All right, great. All right, so we've got this set up. Now let's go and add some of the background elements. Here we have this airplane side, which is just an interior that was actually created in 3D. And we're just going to bring this out. And we're just going to want to move this into place. Now I want to go ahead and make it 3D. So we'll hit F4 to toggle our switches, make it a 3D layer. Then we're going to take this null object that's in 3D space, hit P, and we're going to grab that position and choose copy. And then we're going to paste it to our airplane interior. So now it's pretty much in 3D space. We just need to move it where we want it. Let's see. And just depending on how you want this to look. Now I do want this to be anamorphic, so what I like to do is just use the crop. And this way I can see the area that I really want to focus on for the final crop. Now I can also do something, and that is take our plate of Sam and move it around. So I can actually move it up a bit. And if I shut this off, you'll see that I'm cutting it off. But that's okay because I know I'm only going to use that much of the area. All right, so that looks pretty good. Now let's go ahead and add the background. Now we're just going to be using this sky image. And we'll take it and we'll drop it into the comp. And we'll make it a 3D layer. And we'll push it back in Z space. Now, this we can just kind of push back arbitrarily. We don't really need to know exactly where it is. That looks pretty good. All right, so the next thing I want to do is add a little bit of detail and grime to the windows. Obviously, if Sam were on a flight that Video Copilot was paying for, he wouldn't be flying first class. He'd be in coach. And we want the windows to be, grimy, and we want this airplane to seem a little rickety. So let's take this texture with this grime on it, and let's drop it in right onto the airplane background. So we actually want to make it a 3D layer. And then we're also going to put it into the exact same place as the airplane piece. So we'll click on the position, choose edit, copy, and then paste it to the dodgy texture. And then we're just going to push it back, and now it's right in the place of the window. So we can scale this down a touch and just kind of stick it in the window. And next thing I'm going to do is take the rounded rectangle tool, and we're just going to kind of make a shape. And by the way, if you hold it down and actually wheel the mouse a little bit, you can actually round the corners a bit more. But we're basically going to make it a little bit smaller than the window, and then we're going to subtract it and then hit F and feather it. And then we'll set it, F4, we'll set it to screen, and maybe hit MM, and that brings up the mask options, and bring the expansion in a bit. So basically add just a little bit of grime. Now here's a cool thing. If we take the pan behind tool, actually move the texture around without affecting the image. So we want to find a different place in the texture that we like and just shift it around. Now here's another cool tip we're going to do. So we're using a 2D image for this effect, and it doesn't look as 3D, but we can at least make it a little bit better. And here's how we can do that. We can take this airplane background, duplicate it, and then push it back further in 3D space. So watch this. Push it back. And so now it kind of creates two windows. And if I lower the opacity, it starts to actually look like a reflection. And the cool thing about it is that it will sort of start looking more like a reflection as we get closer to it. So a simple little trick, and we've added maybe a little bit of depth to a shot that is, somewhat two-dimensional. All right, so let's go and create the wing that's going to be out the window. Now, we want it to have a little bit of 3D depth to it. So here's what we're going to do. We have this picture of a wing, and it's been de-stretched in Photoshop from a picture, sort of out the window of an airplane. So I've flattened it into a wing that we can now modify. And I'm going to drop it into a new comp. And it's looking pretty good. What I want to do is take the rectangle tool here, and I want to go ahead and make a slice of the airplane. So what I'll do is come in here and just make a slice right about there. And then I'll duplicate this, or actually before I do that, let's move the anchor point over. Then I'm going to duplicate it. Then I'm going to hit M and Control D, by the way, to duplicate. And I'm going to subtract the first half. So basically what I have is two pieces of the airplane. And what I want to do next is take these pieces, make them 3D layers, and then take this piece right here, and I'm going to rotate it down. So I'm going to take it and rotate it down just a bit, and maybe move it over. So now we have our wing, and next I'm going to add another part, and that is the engine. So here we have just a couple of pieces of engine, and let's bring these out. And I'm actually just going to take this first piece, mask it out. We'll make it a 3D layer, or before we make it a 3D layer, let's move the anchor point. So let's see here. Move the anchor point here. Maybe right here. And then we'll make it a 3D layer. And we're going to flip it around, and then we're going to rotate it. Let's see. Let's rotate it down like this, and then let's flip it around to that direction. And if we switch this to another view, like a custom view, we can actually move this around, and we can start seeing there's a bit of a 3D, feel to this wing. We can take this first piece of the wing and stretch it, or excuse me, this piece, stretch it just a bit, and then we have our engine that we can move around and make it look three-dimensional. So pretty straightforward. Let's move this up a bit, a little closer, and we can start tweaking it a little bit more once we get it into our shot. So we'll take the wing and drop this into our comp. We want to put it below our footage, or actually below, let's see, below a few of these things, just above the sky actually. And we're going to turn on the collapse transformation switch. Now, what this is going to do, as well as the 3D layer switch, it's going to allow us to move it around inside of this comp and basically line it up to look like it matches our shot. But the cool thing is it intersects and interacts in 3D space. So let's move it out there a bit. And now we just have to try to figure out where this wing should be. So it's going to take a little bit of experimentation here. So the camera flies out, we see the wing there. So where is this wing supposed to be? Is it supposed to be up here? Obviously we want to be able to see part of that engine. So what we can do is we can go back in here, move the engine further down the wing, and then take a look at it. Maybe bring it up here, maybe a little closer. Obviously we don't want it to intersect, but what we can do is we can break that intersection with an adjustment layer. So if we take an adjustment layer and put it between these two layers, it'll break up the 3D rendering. And so no matter what, even if I intersect the airplane, it won't come through, and that might help things a bit. So this is cool. Just kind of tweak this a bit. This looks pretty good, and we get that sense that something's going on out there. And this is good. Now remember, our imaginary DC-10 has 2 wing engines, so we need to go ahead and add the other engine. And by the way, now the reason it has 2 engines was that I finished this shot first and then decided to maybe add an establishing shot. And I happen to have a DC-10 model, and the easiest thing I figured was just to start duplicating engines. And so I did. Back to it though. So here we go. We need to add another engine out there. Here's what we can do. We can just take that engine piece, copy it, paste it, and let's bring it below the wing here. And here it is. Let's see. Let's put it out there. Okay. Now the reason I'm doing this engine in this comp and the wing in the other comp is because I want the fire and the smoke to actually be on top of this, and that'll just help composite a little bit better. So let's just line this up a bit. Looking pretty good. We've got a bit of a 3D parallax, and it's looking pretty nice. So now we want to create the illusion that the airplane is beginning to crash or to tilt downward. The way we're going to do that is with this sky background. So we'll set a keyframe on the position and hit F9, and then we'll move forward, and then we can actually move the image up and maybe to the side, and we just start getting the sense that the airplane's going down. And it's just a quick little trick, but it actually works pretty good. And we can delay it a bit, slowing it down. We can, depending on if we want it to look like it's falling in circles, we can adjust that direction. That's looking pretty good, and we get a pretty good sense that it's going down. And nice. All right, so next thing we're going to do is add some fire and smoke and sparks on this engine. So let's move it down actually a little bit so it's under the plane where it should be. And the way we're going to do this is we're going to create a new null object. And this is going to be, we're going to make it 3D, and this is going to be our, pyro effects. And we're going to bring this down, and we're going to take the position of this engine. Check this out. If we unparent it, hit P, grab the position, edit, copy, and then paste it, then we can then reparent it. But this way, we have the absolute position of that object. So we'll move this down just a touch here. And we basically want to tie some of our particle effects to that position in 3D space. Now, we're going to be adding some stock footage elements from Action Essentials 2. It's available from videocopilot.net. The cool thing about this is it's actual footage of smoke, and we also have some actual footage of fire. And these elements are going to really help make it realistic and give it that natural burning effect. But we're also going to be using some particles. So for things like sparks and some of the more general smoke, we're going to be using Particular, which is going to do a really nice job to give us that atmosphere that we're looking for. The only problem is right now everything looks pretty nice out there, so we want to change that up real fast. So here we have some smoke. Let's bring it out, and what I'm going to do is pre-compose it. So we'll choose Layer, Pre-compose, and we'll just call this Smoke. And then we'll open it up, and I want to take this and move it to the center and then rotate it because I want it to come out pretty straight. So that's pretty good. And then I can just feather the bottom of this with a subtraction mask. So we'll just feather it F. Okay, so we'll go back into our airplane comp, and now we've got our smoke here. Let's bring this down to our pyro effects null, and we'll make it a 3D layer. We'll hit the pyro effects, hit P. We're going to copy the position, Control C, Control V, and paste it to our smoke. So now our smoke needs to be blowing, so we'll turn it sideways. And we're going to stretch it out. Let's see, I think we need to adjust this a bit. So let's scale it up. Now again, we want this to be underneath the wing, but over the engine. So let's put another, we'll call this divider. We'll duplicate that and put it below the airplane wing so that our smoke and effects will always be underneath it, even if it's intersecting. So if I take that off, you can see our smoke intersects with the wing right here. And that's kind of cool, but I'm going to go back and just keep that divider on there so that I can control my smoke and keep it underneath the wing. All right, so we want to make sure that this looks like it's coming straight off the engine. I'll move it up a touch. And we'll rotate it. Now we want it to be black smoke, so we'll choose color correction, tint, and we'll just set both colors to black. And then we want it to be more intense, so we'll choose effect, color correction, curves. So we want it to be intense, like Harrison Ford was in one of my favorite movies of all time. He plays the president of the United States, and he's on an airplane that gets hijacked. Now he was supposed to go in the escape pod and get off the airplane, but instead he stayed to fight because that's what Harrison Ford does. Great movie, and you guys should definitely check it out. It's called Con Air, and it's got Nicolas Cage in it, and just I mean, it's one of those great airplane movies. All right, so we've got the smoke. It's pretty dark. You know, if we stretch it out, we can really make it look intense. Now we need even more, you know, smoke and craziness. So I'm probably going to duplicate that smoke and offset the time of it. All right, so that's a good start. All right, so the next thing I want to go ahead and composite. So we have this torch, and it's not the perfect element to use, but it will get us a pretty good look. So quick way to put this in here is take one of these smoke elements, duplicate them, and then take the torch and hold down Alt and drop it on there. And then we can just remove those effects. So now we have the torch in the shot. We'll scale it down. Probably move it forward. I want it to be in front of the fire. And we kind of wrap it around this engine as if this engine is on fire. That's not bad. Maybe stretch it out some more. I want this to look pretty rough. And again, we can duplicate it, do a time stretch to 50%. And that way there'll be another element that's going a lot faster, and it'll just give you that sense of motion and that things are really looking bad for Sam. All right, cool. You know, we can color correct this in a bit, but for now, let's just try to get the elements into the shot. Now, the next thing I want to add is particular. So we're going to create a new solid, and we'll call this smoke. Or actually, let's do sparks first. Okay, so we'll type in particular, and we're going to drop that in there. And we're going to take the emitter. So right now the particles are just in a random place, but I want to go ahead and move the position to be in line with our pyro effects position. So here's how we'll do that. Take our sparks, we'll bring it down here, maybe above the torch. And we're going to alt-click on the position, and that's going to create a quick expression here. Let's see, I need to make it all visible. We're going to drag this down and select the pyro position. And then we're going to alt-click on the Z position and drag this down to the Z position here. So that's it. And now our sparks will be coming from that area. So right now it's looking pretty good. So let's move this above the engine. So next we just need to create the motion. So what I can do is change this maybe to a box and set the direction to directional. Turn up the velocity here, and then we can just rotate it. And just so you can see this by itself, I'm rotating it -90 degrees. So now these particles are shooting off the back. Now again, we're going to turn this up even more, turn on the motion blur, and turn it on for the comp. And actually, I wonder if we can turn it on just by itself. So we'll just shut it off for the comp. And that way, we don't have to turn the motion blur on for everything else. So we'll boost the opacity here. And come up here. Let's change the color to like orange or yellow. Cool, and then we'll set it to add. And then maybe randomize the size. Cool. And maybe turn the size up a bit so it looks like more sparks are coming off that. All right, so let's take a look at where we're at. And I think that's looking pretty good for right now, but it's not energetic enough. It's not crazy enough. You know, when you're in an airplane and you just want it to be as dramatic as possible. So let's add some even more crazy atmosphere. So what I'm going to do is take the sparks that we just created, and I'm going to duplicate that layer. And we're going to call this, atmosphere. And let's put this, let's say we'll put this above the airplane wing. And let's take the motion blur off. And let's just turn up the color, turn that up to white, and turn up the size. And maybe lower the opacity a bit. And then basically we just want to make a huge particle field. Now, right now they're coming from that same position, so we actually probably just want to change that. Let's just delete this, and then we'll move it ourselves. So we'll just move the particle emitter over and then back. Cool. So we'll crank up the size of these particles, lower the opacity. And now we get, maybe we'll set back to screen. It's not blowing it out. All right, so now we have some atmosphere kind of blowing. Let me just solo that so we can look at it by itself. So we've got the atmosphere blowing, but it's just blowing way too slow. So let's crank up the velocity a lot. And let's see how that looks. All right, so that's starting to help a lot. And, we could build on that and add more. And, another thing I remember doing now in the original was I took one of these smoke elements and I actually left it white. and I cranked it up a bit. And then I scaled it down really thin and stretched it out. And then what I did is I just put it at the edge of the wing and just try to create a bit of a, smoke stream off the edge of that wing, so that, I just thought it was interesting just to make it a little less uniform. And this way there's just a lot of, turbulent things going on, and, it just makes it a little more exciting. So now we've got the basic compositing elements in place. Now we need to do some crazier camera shake. Now we have a real camera, so we want to do some camera shake that actually moves the camera. So we have this null object that's our world space null. So we'll just call this world. And I'm going to add an expression. So I'm going to choose expression slider control. And I'm going to take the position of this null and hit P. I'm going to alt click on it, and I'm going to type wiggle, and we'll do like 8, comma, and I'm going to pick whip this slider control, and then do a parenthesis. So what this is saying is I'm going to adjust the position with a wiggle, which is like a random movement, and use this slider value as the intensity. So if you hit return, you can rename it. So about at this point, now here's the trick. If I move the camera right now, my footage of Sam is not going to move because it's just footage. But if I time it right, set a keyframe, move forward here, and start adding that camera shake, hopefully it'll begin to shake crazy after he's out of the frame. And again, and it in fact looks like that's what's going on. So maybe this is a bit too much. Let's change it to 7. Now the cool thing is that everything in the shot is 3D. So once we pass our plate of Sam and we get to the full CG set, we can start moving the camera around and pretty much do whatever we want. We could fly out the window further and go out to the wing, a lot of different things. So let's set this down a little bit more to 6 and maybe the intensity to 20. And I'm also going to add a bit of a wiggle to the orientation. So we need another slider control. So let's duplicate this one. I'll call this rotation. And I'm going to alt click, so we'll hit E, and I'm going to alt click on the orientation for the camera. And again, I'm going to type wiggle, maybe 4, comma, and pick whip that rotation amount and do a parenthesis. So wiggle has 2 values. The first value is how many times per second, and the second is the intensity. So a lower number will be slower movement, but a higher value in the second, or on the slider value, will make the camera move more. So we'll find the right balance, and it should look good. Now we lower this down to maybe 5%. Let's take a look. All right, so that's definitely a bit much, but you can sort of see what's going on. The camera really is coming to life and moving around very crazy, and that's what you would probably expect. So if we lower these values, it'll seem a little bit smoother and maybe a little more realistic. So let's see. Okay, so now we have this other thing that we have to worry about, and that is just making things, look decent. So right now everything's kind of, raw footage, but we need to add some color correction, some glow, and just sort of integrate this a little bit better. So first thing, let's just go back to the default place. So let's take our footage of Sam and let's add a curves adjustment. And let's also add a tint effect. So we'll set the tint amount just a little bit lower because, he's supposed to be on this airplane, supposed to be a little bit sadder, and we don't want it to be too vivid. Now we'll take this airplane background. So let's see the first one. Let's see. So this is the reflection, and this is the interior. So we'll take the interior. We'll choose curves, and we'll darken it down a bit. and maybe add a touch of warmth just to the inside here. That's not bad. Now, we'll come down here. Now, we have this divider, but it's also an adjustment layer, so we can actually add effects to it. So check this out. I'm going to add an exposure effect. So I'm going to turn up the gamma, maybe turn up the exposure just a bit, and check that out. I've sort of blown that window out, and what I can do is I can actually keyframe this. So if I hit U, I can see those keyframes, and as the camera's going out the window, I can then, auto expose to what's outside. And it's just kind of a cool idea that we're inside, everything's kind of blown out outside, but we can kind of go in between those two. Now, we do need an overall glow, so let's go to the top here and add an adjustment layer. We'll call this color correction. And we'll do something like, again, let's do a curves with a tint with a glow. So stylized glow, and they're all off the screen. Sorry about that. So we'll turn this tint down, and the glow, probably want to turn this up. Now the other thing, that's kind of a problem is they're glowing also. So we want to turn up the threshold so that we're mostly just glowing this window. So we'll turn up the glow amount so that it really kind of affects them. But we also don't want to blow out the background too much. I mean, it's important that we keep as much of this interior detail as possible. So we want to be careful there as well. So again, the interior, I might just give it a little bit more life here. Darken it down a little bit more. And the other thing we can do to make it look a little bit more like it's claustrophobic is a vignette. So we can do another adjustment layer here with a curve adjustment. And we can just crank it down a bit and then actually just put it right below the plate of Sam. And then create a rectangle tool that cuts out the middle and then subtract it and then feather it. And what this does is it also gives Sam a bit of a shadow vibe behind him, but also makes it feel like there's something above him that's casting a shadow, like the overhead compartment and some of that other stuff that would be up there. I'm also going to create another adjustment layer, and we're going to add another glow, stylize glow. And let's put this just below the footage of Sam. And that way we can only glow the back window. And then we can just turn up a nice soft glow so it looks like the light that's on the window. And I like that. Now here's another cool trick is if I take the interior and duplicate it and put it just above that, I can then take this and set it to, or rather alpha matte. So now we can see if I crank this up a lot, the glow is only on the inside of the window instead of making the window blown out as well. So the difference is everything's blown out or just the interior of the window is blown out. So that's nice because, it kind of creates a bit of a light wrap type of an effect. We can tint the color of this glow by using AB color, and we can change this here. And I'm not trying to just blow through all this stuff. I'm just trying to give you guys things to think about. Not just step-by-step stuff, because a lot of compositing is just, trying things and getting a feel for them and then trying something else. So you never want to know just what button to push. You want to know the idea of what you're trying to accomplish. So be thinking about that. The other thing I want to do is sort of the rack focus. So once we get close to this, we can start seeing that, it's two-dimensional. But I was kind of counting on the fact that we could use depth of field to blur that out. So a couple of ways we can do that. One, we can actually use the camera's own depth of field, but that can be a bit slow, so it's probably easier just to take the interior footage and just add like a box blur. And as we get closer to it, maybe here, we can set a keyframe and then move forward and then blur it out. And then hit F9 and just want to gradually sort of rack focus to the outside. Now, we just need to make sure we do this to all the layers. So if we select these keyframes, we'll choose Edit Copy, and then we'll go to the reflection, we'll paste it there. We'll go to the window grime, we'll paste it there. So now we've got all that stuff blurred out. Now for the window grime on this dodgy texture, maybe we lower the blur just so that we can see it through. Just makes it look a little bit more intense. We don't want to blur it to the point of not being able to recognize what we're looking at. So, and then it looks like my glow is not blurred out, so I used that interior for a glow earlier, so I also need to make sure any instances of this are also blurred out so that the edges will look clean. Now, I'm sure we can improve this further, but hopefully these steps will just give you an idea on what goes into a shot of this complexity. So let's just take a quick look. So everything is there, just probably tweak some of the color correction a little bit. Now, here was the final version from the video. Got this kind of high frequency vibration, and the camera actually goes further through the window. So, that's kind of interesting. You kind of just push the camera a little bit further. But, I think everything's there. Maybe add the glow a little bit more. I think gives it a more natural look. It's that temptation of wanting to see what's out there, but interfering with what would probably be more realistic. So, oh yeah, I almost forgot. We actually shot an oxygen mask, or actually something we made that looks like one, and we just kind of dropped it down, and we didn't end up using it just because it dropped down right where the camera was moving, because the camera's going straight out. And so it drops down right in front of the camera, and it kind of looked like we were trying to hide something, and so we didn't end up using it. But I'll go ahead and put this element into the project file. So if you guys are, doing your own thing, you want to throw it in there, knock yourself out. Anyways, hopefully you guys enjoyed this tutorial. I know there's a lot of information in here, and you start a tutorial like this, about airplanes, and you're just not sure if it's going to take off. And you have all these airplane puns, and you just don't know what to do with them. For example, I didn't have a lot of time to plan this tutorial, so I just kind of winged it. That's not going to fly. Anyway, rest assured, I've got tons of airplane puns, and hopefully some of them land. Did that one fly over your head? Okay, I got to get out of here, because this is just getting bad. This is getting really bad. My name is Andrew Kramer, and we will see you next time.